Dad, you got the wrong number. My father died years ago. Don't call me again. I stood frozen, holding the phone in my hand as doctors tried to revive my grandson. My son had denied me to protect his inheritance, but what he didn't know was that the dead man was about to ruin his life forever. I slowly lowered the phone. The screen went black, as did my soul at that very moment. The high-pitched beeping of the heart monitor pierced my ears. Beep, beep, beep. Every sound was one more second of life for Pedrito, and another nail in my own coffin. Around me, the emergency room of the general hospital was chaos. The smell of cheap bleach, the crying of children, and that heavy air that can only be breathed where poverty meets death. Mr. Sanchez. The nurse's voice broke me from my trance. She shook my arm impatiently. Please react. The doctor needs the authorization and the deposit right now. The boy is going into septic shock. She spoke to the father. I looked at the woman, her face tired and her uniform stained, and then I looked at my own hands. Those hands covered in calluses, with broken nails from mixing cement and carrying bricks under the sun, those same hands that had paid for my son's education coin by coin, sacrifice by sacrifice. I felt a lump in my throat so big, I thought I was going to choke. How was I going to tell that woman that the boy's father, my own son, had just killed me while I was still alive? I couldn't manage to whisper, my voice cracking like old glass. He didn't answer. Gosh, sir, she exclaimed in frustration, slamming the metal folder against the counter. Without the insurance holder's signature or cash payment, we can take him to the operating room. Those are the rules. I looked through the dirty glass at the stretcher. Pedrito, my little Pedrito, was there, pale as a sheet, with purple lips. He was the only thing I had left of my late wife. If he left, I had no reason to keep breathing. I have the card, I said, trembling, as I pulled out the extra credit card Carlos had given me years ago with a shark-like grin and natty sabuan. Use it for emergencies, man. I don't want you to want for anything, he had told me. The cashier handed it to him with a trembling hand. It was my last hope. The girl at the register, a young woman who was chewing gum listlessly, slid the plastic card across the terminal. 1, 2, 3 eternal seconds. The machine emitted a dry buzz and a red light blinked. Declined, she said without looking me in the eye. It says, insufficient funds, and card reported stolen. The world collapsed on me. I felt like my knees were going to give out. This can't be true. I screamed, forgetting my embarrassment. Try again, miss. By the Virgin of Guadalupe, my son is a millionaire. He would never do this. Sir, don't make a scene, or I'll call security, she replied coldly, handing me back the card as if it were burning. If you don't have the money, you'll have to take the child somewhere else. We're not a charity here. I stood there, humiliated, with the useless card in one hand and my grandson's life slipping through my fingers in the other. Carlos's betrayal wasn't just a blow to the heart. It was a death sentence for his own son. But as tears of rage began to blur my vision, I felt a firm hand rest on my shoulder. Don Roberto, a deep voice said behind me. I turned. He was a tall nurse, with a sour-looking face, but eyes that I recognized from somewhere before. You are Carlos Sanchez's father? The man asked, lowering his voice. I nodded, unable to speak. I heard everything, Don Roberto, the nurse whispered, leaning close to my ear so no one else would hear. And believe me, you're not taking the child anywhere because your son, the millionaire, is in this very building. I wiped away my tears with a slap. What? He's upstairs, in the presidential suite on the 5th floor, the nurse said with a grimace of disgust. And if you knew what he's celebrating while his grandson is dying down here, you'd go up and rip his head off yourself. At that moment, the pain disappeared. The fear vanished. All that remained in my chest was a cold fire, a thirst for justice that straightened my back. Take me to him, I said, and so my revenge began. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments below. The nurse, that Jorge guy, asked me to wait a moment while he went to check something in the system. I was left alone again, standing in the middle of that hallway that seemed to shrink with each passing second. I approached Pedrito's stretcher. He looked so small amidst all those rough white sheets in the public hospital. His little face, usually rosy and full of laughter when we played hide-and-seek in my backyard, was now gray and ashen. His eyes were closed, and he was breathing in a wheezing sound that tore at my heart. Instinctively, I reached out to caress his forehead, but I stopped halfway. I looked at my hand. It was an ugly hand. There's no other way to put it. It was covered in sunspots. Its knuckles were swollen from arthritis, and its skin was so tough it felt like old leather. It had scars from cuts with rusty rods, lime burns, and cracks that never fully healed because he never stopped working. They were the hands of a bricklayer, the hands of a construction foreman, hands that had put up walls, poured roofs, and carried 50-kilogram loads since he was 12 years old. I felt embarrassed to touch my grandson's soft skin with this sandpaper I had for a palm. "Forgive me, my boy," I whispered, pulling my hand away. "Your grandfather only knows how to break rocks. He doesn't know how to fix what's inside you." I leaned against the cold wall and closed my eyes. The image of my late wife, Maria, came to mind. She always told me, "Roberto, your hands are rough, but the safest in the world." She died dreaming that our son Carlos would be different, that he wouldn't have to break his back in the sun like me, that Roberto would study, that he would have a degree, that he would wear a suit and work in an office with air conditioning. She would tell me before cancer took her. And I made her dream come true. Boy, did I make her dream come true. I worked double shifts for 20 years. I ate cold bean cakes on the construction site to save every penny. When Carlos entered a private university because the young master didn't want to go to the public school with the riffraff, I sold my van. When he wanted to go on an exchange to Spain, I mortgaged the house for the first time. I remember his graduation day. He was there, shining in his cap and gown, surrounded by his rich friends. I arrived in my best shirt, the one I only wore to church on Sundays, and my slick boots. When I went to hug him, he stiffened. "Dad, don't hug me so hard. You'll wrinkle my gown," he said to me, in a low voice, looking around to see if anyone saw us. "And please, don't talk so loud. You'll notice your neighborhood accent." That day I felt the first twinge in my heart, but I swallowed it. I thought, it's just nerves. He's young. He'll learn. But he didn't. Those soft hands of his, cared for with expensive creams, hands that had never carried anything heavier than a leather briefcase, became increasingly greedy. They turned into claws, and now those same silken hands had hung up on me, while his own blood was dying. The coughing fit pulled me. The boy writhed. The machine next up. "Grandpa." "Here I am, my life, here I am," I said, forgetting my shame and grabbing his little hand tightly. I felt his cold fingers squeeze my calluses. "The doctor is coming. Hold on a little longer. You are a warrior, like your grandfather, aren't you?" "I'm thirsty," he murmured. I looked for water with my eyes, but there was nothing, only desperation. I touched my pants pocket. It was empty. I lacked funds for water even. I had given it all to Carlos the previous week for a supposedly safe investment that would multiply my savings. "Damn my luck," I muttered, punching the wall with my fist. The physical pain distracted me a little from the pain in my soul. When did I become this? A useless old man who can't even buy water for his dying grandson. Working from dawn to dusk for 40 years to end up like this, begging for emotional alms from a son who despises me. God, if you're there. I looked at the peeling ceiling of the hospital. Don't take him away. Take me away. I've already lived. I'm already spent. He's just getting started. Don't punish me for raising a monster. The beeping of the machine steadied a little, but the cold sweat on Pedrito's forehead told me that time was running out. I needed money, and I needed it. I was already walking towards the administration window again. My legs weighed like lead. The lady at the checkout, the one who had declined my card, was tapping on her computer without looking at me. "Miss," I said, trying to sound dignified, even though I was shaking inside. "Please, I need to speak to someone, a supervisor, the manager, whoever." She sighed, blowing her gum into a bubble before popping it. Plop. "Sir, I told you. No deposit, no surgery. That's hospital policy. It's nothing personal." "Of course it is personal," I exploded, slamming my open palm on the counter. "It's a child's life. A 5-year-old. Do you have children?" The girl stopped and glared at me. "Yes, I do. And I work here to feed them. If I let him in without paying, they will deduct the cost from me. And believe me, I don't make that much." I was speechless. Poverty makes us enemies of each other. She was right in its cruel way. I started to unbuckle my watch band. It was an old Seiko automatic, one of those heavy, stainless steel ones. Maria had given it to me for our 25th anniversary, a year before she died. It was the only thing of value I had left, apart from my wedding ring. "Look," I said, placing it on the formica counter. "It's a good watch. Japanese. It never gets late. Okay, it's worth at least 3,000 pesos if you pawn it. Take it as collateral. I'll sign a promissory note for the rest. Tomorrow I'll sell my tools. I'll sell anything, but operate on the boy." The girl looked at the watch with disdain. She touched it with the tip of her pen as if it were a dead insect. "Sir, this is a hospital, not a pawn shop. Keep your watch." I felt my face burning. Shame is an acid that eats away at you from the inside. But I didn't give up. I couldn't. I took off my gold ring, my wedding ring. It had been on my finger for 40 years. The skin underneath was white and split. "And this is 14-karat gold." My voice cracked. "This is my wife's ring." "Please, sir." She raised her voice, drawing the attention of the security guard dozing in the corner. "Enough. Either pay or leave. You're blocking the line." I looked back. There was a woman holding a baby in her arms, and a man holding a towel covered in blood in his hand. They were all looking at me, not with hatred, but with pity, and that was worse. Pity is the worst insult to a man who has always been self-sufficient. I put my treasures in my pocket, feeling poorer than ever. I turned away, defeated. I shuffled toward the waiting room. I sat down on one of those hard plastic chairs that seemed designed to torture your back. I took out my phone again. 2% battery left. I dialed Carlos' number out of inertia. "The number you dialed is either turned off or out of range." I hung up. I looked at my boots. They were dirty with dried mud. That morning I had been helping a neighbor shovel a sidewalk to earn a few extra pesos. "Look at you, Roberto," I thought. "A dirty old man with no money, no power. Your son is right. You're useless." In that moment of total darkness, when I was already considering stealing some medicine or kidnapping a doctor, I saw a pair of spotless white shoes stop in front of mine. I looked up. It was Jorge, the nurse. He had 2 cups of steaming coffee in his hands. His expression was no longer professional or distant. It was a mix of concern and fury. "Here, Mr. Roberto." He handed me one of the cups. "It's the bad one from the machine, but it's hot and has a lot of sugar. You're going to need it." I took it with trembling hands. The warmth of the cardboard comforted me a little. "Thank you, son, but I have nothing to pay you with." Jorge sat down next to me, ignoring the protocol that prohibits staff from fraternizing with patients. "He doesn't owe me anything. You don't remember, do you?" I looked at him carefully. He had a small scar on his left eyebrow. "I remember 12 years ago. Hurricane Alex. My house in the Topo Chico neighborhood lost its roof. My mother, Mrs. Lupe, was crying because the furniture was getting wet. You drove by in your truck, saw the disaster, and got out." Suddenly, the memory came back. Rain, wind, flying sheets of metal. Mrs. Lupe, the one who made the best pork tamales. Exactly. Jorge smiled, although his eyes were still sad. You worked 3 days straight in the rain to put a new roof on. You put the materials out of your own pocket, and when my mother wanted to pay you, you told her, save that for the kid's studies. The kid was me, Mr. Roberto. I'm a nurse because you helped us keep our house side together. I got a lump in my throat. Jeez, I didn't know. Life takes many turns, boss, and today it's my turn to return the favor. Jorge leaned toward me, lowering his voice, looking around, as if he were about to confess to a crime. That's why I can't let this happen. What I told you a while ago is true. Your son is here. I felt my blood run cold and boil at the same time. In the VIP suite. Are you sure? Jorge nodded slowly, pulled out his cell phone, and showed me a blurry photo. It looked like it had been taken secretly from a hallway. You could see a pair of varnished wooden double doors with a gold sign, presidential suite. Private event. And next to it, a small sign on a tripod that said, Welcome De La Garza family to Sanchez. Sanchez. I read aloud. It's him, Jorge Carlos. Sanchez confirmed. He's celebrating his engagement to the daughter of Ernesto de la Garza, the owner of the El Paraíso hotel chain. It's a small party, very exclusive, only the cream of the city. Engagement. I repeated the word as if it were poison. But he told me he was in Monterrey closing an export deal. He told me he had no signal. You have a signal, money, and champagne, Mr. Roberto, Jorge said with suppressed rage. I saw it with my own eyes when I went up to drop off some medicine. He's there, laughing, while you're here selling your watch. I squeezed the coffee glass so hard that I crushed it, spilling some hot liquid over my fingers. I didn't feel the pain. That bastard. I grunted. He's gonna let his son die to marry a rich woman. Worse yet, Jorge said, hesitating for a second. I overheard the nurses on the VIP floor gossip. They say the boyfriend, his son, has presented himself as a man with no ties, no past, and no family. I stood up. My knees were no longer shaking. I felt an ancient strength. That strength that emerges when you must lift a steel beam by yourself because there is no one else to do it. Take me, I said dryly. Don Roberto, this is a restricted area. There are guards. If they see you like that, he looked me up and down. With all due respect, they won't let you near the elevator. I'm not asking for your permission, Jorge. I'm telling you to take me, or I'll go up the fire escapes and kick the door down. Jorge looked me in the eye. He saw that I wasn't joking. He saw the man who had fixed his mother's roof in a storm. He sighed and stood up. Okay, but we have to be quick. Use this. He took off his white lab coat and put it over on my shoulders. It was tight on my arms, but it covered my cement-stained shirt and... Let's take the freight elevator. The one we used to bring up the bodies and dirty clothes. No one is watching there at this hour. Come on, I said, throwing my coffee in the trash. I didn't need caffeine anymore. I had enough hatred in my veins to keep me awake for a whole week. Walking through the inner corridors of the hospital was like walking through the guts of a beast. Jorge walked turgidly ahead, nodding to the other doctors so they wouldn't notice the old man following him. I kept my head down, clenching my fists in the pockets of my borrowed lab coat. Calm down, Roberto, I told myself off. Don't lose your mind yet. You have to see him first. You have to be sure, because deep down in my father's heart, a part of me, a stupid and naive part, still wanted to believe it was a mistake. That maybe Carlos was there on business. That maybe he didn't know how serious Pedrito was. That maybe he saw me. He would run to hug me and take out his checkbook to save the boy. It's incredible how one clings to the image of the child one carried in one's arms, even when that child is already 30 years old and has wolf teeth. We reached the service elevator. It smelled of industrial disinfectant and something else, something sweet and rotten. Jorge swiped his magnetic card and the scratched metal doors opened. We went in. Jorge pressed button 5. The button was marked with a red sticker that said private. The elevator began to rise with a metallic clatter. Floor 1, emergency room. Floor 2, maternity. Floor 3, intensive care. Listen, Mr. Burrow, Jorge said without looking at me, watching the numbers change. When we get to the top, I can't go into the suite with you. I'd lose my job and I've 3 children to support. Don't worry, son. You've done enough. I'm going to leave you in the service corridor, behind the kitchen in the VIP area. From there, you go out into the main corridor. Suite 502 is at the end, on the right. You can't miss it. It's the only one with guards at the entrance, but at this hour they're usually flirting with the receptionists. Do you understand? Now, Mr. Roberto, Jorge turned and put a hand on my shoulder. If you need, if things get ugly, I'll be close by. I'm going to leave my cell phone recording on the medicine cart outside the door, just in case. I looked at him gratefully. You're a good man, Jorge. Your mother did a good job. Better than I did with mine. Don't say that. Children make their own decisions. You gave him the tools. He chose to use them to build a gilded cage instead of a home. It's not his fault. The elevator dinged to a gentle stop. The doors opened. The change was dramatic. Down below, the air was hot and smelled of sickness. Up here, on the 5th floor, the air conditioning was at a perfect temperature, almost freezing. It smelled like the band and expensive pavement. Jorge looked out first. Clear. Run. I got out of the elevator and ducked into a side aisle filled with carts holding trays of silver food. There were plates of leftover lobster, half-finished wine glasses, and embroidered cloth napkins. I saw a piece of bread on a tray and my stomach growled. I hadn't eaten anything all day, but nausea took away my hunger. I walked to the door that led to the main hallway. I pushed it a little. What I saw took my breath away. It didn't look like a hospital. It looked like the lobby of a 5-star hotel. The floor was made of Italian marble, so shiny you could see your face in it. The walls were lined with paintings that were probably worth more than my entire house. There were vases of exotic flowers every 2 meters. And the silence. Thank God. What an expensive silence. Here you couldn't hear the screams of pain, nor the sirens, nor the cries. Here death and pain were hidden under the Persian carpet. I walked, trying to keep my old boots from making noise on the marble. Clock, clock. Each step resonated like a gunshot. I arrived near Suite 502. Sure enough, there were no guards at the door. I could hear laughter from inside. Laughter from people who don't have any worries. Laughter from people who have never had to count coins to buy tortillas. And then, I heard his voice. That voice I had known since he was babbling his first words. And that's why I tell you, the key to success is knowing when to cut the ballast. The past is useless if it prevents you from flying. It was Carlos. He was giving a speech. I pressed myself against the wall, right next to the half-open door. My heart was beating so loudly that I thought they could hear it from inside. I took off Jorge's robe. I didn't want to hide. I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to see my cement stains, my humble clothes. I wanted to be the speck of dirt in their perfect world. I took a deep breath. Once, twice, 3 times. Come on, Roberto, I whispered to myself. For Pedrito, and I looked out. The presidential suite was bigger than my entire house. It had huge windows that looked out onto the city lit up at night. There was a bar, white leather armchairs, and a long table laden with gourmet sandwiches. There were about 10 people, all dressed in evening wear. The women in long dresses and shiny jewelry. The men in dark suits and watches that cost what I would earn in 10 years. And at the center of it all, he was. Carlos looked stunning. He sheen. I have to admit it. He was wearing a bespoke pearl gray suit, his hair slicked back, and he had that toothpaste commercial smile he practiced in front of the mirror. He held a flute in his hand filled with bubbling golden liquid. Beside him, clutching his arm like a trophy, was a very pretty young woman, blonde, in a red dress that showed off a lot of her back. She must have been Dia Garza's daughter. She looked happy, naive. I didn't blame her. He didn't know she was hugging a snake. Across from them, a fat, bald man with a bulldog face and a dull fan in his mouth nodded approvingly. Ernesto de la Garza, the tycoon. "You're right, my boy," de la Garza said in a powerful voice. "I like your philosophy. To succeed in business, you have to be tough, without sentimentality. That's why I agreed to let you marry my Vanessa. I need someone with a cool head to manage my hotels when I retire." "I won't let you down, Ernesto," Carlos replied, raising his glass. "Wordas. For me, the family we're forming is all that matters. The rest is ancient history." Speaking of ancient history, the bride's mother chimed in. A lady with a snobby face who was holding a chihuahua with a pearl necklace. "Carlos, my dear, you've never told us much about your origins. We know you're self-made, which is admirable, but what happened to your parents? Wouldn't they have liked to see this moment?" I tensed. My nails dug into the door frame. This was the moment. Carlos' chance to tell the truth, to say, "My father is a hard-working man who gave me everything, even though we're estranged now." Carlos looked down for a second, paused dramatically. An actor worthy of an Oscar. "Oh, Doña Cecilia, this is a painful subject for me," he said in a soft, almost broken voice. "My mother, a saint, died when I was born. That much was true." "And your father?" the lady insisted. Carlos sighed, looked up and met his future mother-in-law's eyes with a sincerity that made me want to vomit. My father was a good man at first, but after Mom died, he lost himself in alcohol, gambling, and bad company." He shook his head. "I tried to help him, believe me. I paid his debts. I put him in rehab 1,000 times, but he was a bottomless pit. He became violent, dangerous." "How awful!" exclaimed the girl, Vanessa, squeezing his arm. In the end, Carlos wiped away an invisible tear. "He died 3 years ago. Cirrhosis. He died in prison. I only had to go and identify the body. It was the saddest day of my life. That's why I say I'm an orphan. You're the only family I have left." The silence in the room was one of respect and pity for poor Carlos. But there was an explosion in my head. It was as if I had been hit in the back of the head with a hammer. Alcoholic. I had never had more than 2 beers at a party. Gambling. I kept every peso under the mattress. Violent. I had never laid a hand on him, not even when he deserved it. Dead. I touched my chest. My heart was beating. He was alive. But to him, I was a convenient corpse. A sad story to gain sympathy. And then I heard what followed. The final blow. "Well, let's leave the sadness behind," said Don Ernesto, patting Carlos on the back. "The important thing is that you bring capital to the merger. The transfer you made this morning confirms your commitment to. The sale of that inherited land was very timely." "Yes," Carlos smiled, regaining his arrogance. "It was difficult to get rid of the old family property. It had sentimental value, but you have to invest in the future. Also, with that money we secured the expansion in the Riviera Maya. The land, my house, the house where he was born, the house that I built brick by brick with these hands, the house where Pedrito had his swing in the avocado tree. I had sold it. I had sold it today. And the money that could save Pedrito's life at this very moment, I had given it to this rich old man to invest. He had exchanged his son's life for a hotel. I felt something break inside me. It wasn't my heart. It was the chain of unconditional love, the chain of, he is my son, and I forgive him for everything. That chain broke, rusted by betrayal. I was no longer his father. Now I was his judge. I peeled myself off the wall. My old boots, they hit the marble floor loudly. Knock, knock, knock. The sound echoed through the room. One by one, the guests turned toward the door. The lady with the dog gasped. Don Ernesto frowned, and Carlos turned slowly, his glass halfway to his mouth. His eyes met mine. I saw the color drain from his face. I saw his pupils dilate in terror. I saw the glass slip from his fingers. Crash. The glass shattered on the floor, splattering champagne and glass everywhere, but no one moved. I took a step inside the suite. The light from the chandeliers illuminated my clothes, my faded pants, my unshaven face, and my eyes that no longer held tears, only fire. Good night, I said. My voice sounded raspy, deep, terrible, like sound of two stones colliding. Excuse my appearance. I just came straight from the cemetery. Carlos opened his mouth, but no sound came out. It seemed a fish out of water. It seems the dead man forgot to stay in his grave. I continued, walking slowly toward the snack table, and he is very, very hungry. Indeed. The silence that followed my entrance was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. The piano background music continued to play mockingly, but no one breathed. Carlos froze his hand, outstretched where his glass used to be. His face was a map of panic. For a second, I saw the boy breaking a vase and waiting for the belt to hit him. But that boy was gone. In front of me was a cornered businessman. And rats, when cornered, bite. "Who is this man, Carlos?" asked Don Ernesto the tycoon, breaking the spell. He took his fan out of his mouth and looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and disgust, as if I were a cockroach that had just emerged from a salad. Carlos blinked quickly, composing himself, adjusted his jacket, and let out a nervous, forced laugh that sounded like a dry bark. "Oh my God," Carlos exclaimed, walking towards me with his arms open, but his eyes shooting daggers. "Anselmo, I can't believe it." "Anselmo," I frowned. Carlos turned to his guest, putting on his best pitying face. "Gentlemen, excuse me. This poor man is Anselmo. He was my father's gardener for many years." He grabbed me by the shoulder with a force that was meant to be affectionate, but was actually trying to push me towards the exit. "The poor man was very affected when Dad died. Sometimes senile dementia makes you think he still works for us or that he's part of the family." I felt a wave of heat rise up my neck. Not only had he killed me, now I had become his crazy gardener. "Gardener?" asked Vanessa, the bride, looking at me with pity. "Oh, poor thing. Look how he's dressed. He smells of the street. Heat." "Yes, my love," Carlos said, squeezing my arm so hard that his nails pierced the fabric of the nurse's coat and my shirt. "It's a tragedy. Anselmo, old friend. You escaped from the asylum again. Come on, let's go outside so I can get you a taxi." He tried to drag me. I planted my old boots on the marble and didn't move an inch. 40 years of carrying cement loads had given me legs that were like oak roots. Carlos, with his expensive gyms and his proteins, couldn't move me. I broke free from his grip with a sudden movement. I walked towards the buffet table. My stomach growled again. With all the calm in the world, I grabbed a smoked salmon canapé with my lime-stained fingers. I chewed it slowly, looking Don Ernesto in the eyes. "The fish is delicious," I said, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand. "Although it tastes a bit like betrayal, don't you think?" Don Ernesto narrowed his eyes. He was a businessman, an old shark. He knew when someone was lying, and something about Carlos's performance. It didn't add up. Carlos Ernesto said in a serious voice, "Let the Lord speak." "If he's your gardener, why did he call you son when he came in?" Carlos began to sweat. Shiny beads appeared on his perfectly shaved forehead. "I already told you, Don Ernesto is confused. The alcohol has burned his brain. Dad always pitied him, that's why he let him call him that. It's pathetic." "What's pathetic?" I interrupted hoarsely. "Is that a man wears a $0 suit paid for with his own son's blood." A murmur ran through the room. "Son," Vanessa whispered. "But you said you didn't have children." Carlos turned red with anger. He forgot about etiquette. "Enough," he shouted. "Security! Get this drunk out of here." But before he could do anything else, I I approached him. I invaded his personal space. I smelled his expensive cologne mixed with the sweat of fear. "Get me out if you have the pants," I whispered, but loud enough for those closest to hear. Back at me. "Get me out, Carlos. But if you touch me, I swear on your mother's memory that I will scream to your girlfriend the name you're trying to forget." Carlos stopped dead in his tracks. He knew who I was referring to. He knew that I held the key to his destruction. The tension in the room was unbearable. The guests watched the spectacle as if it were a live soap opera. No one dared intervene. "Name." Vanessa stepped forward. She looked confused, scared. Doubt was beginning to crack her perfect makeup. "Carlos, what name is he talking about?" Carlos looked at me. In his eyes I saw a desperate plea. "Please, Dad, don't do it," his eyes said, but his lips were still sealed with ambition. Why? If he had said at that moment, "Excuse me, it's my father. I need help," I would have forgiven him. I swear, I would have sold my soul to help him. But he didn't. "Vanessa, my love, don't listen to him," Carlos said, turning to her and turning his back on me. "It's a name he makes up. An imaginary friend." "Pedrito," I said. The name fell into the room like a stone in a pond. "Pedrito," I repeated louder, "is 5 years old. He likes dinosaurs and chocolate ice cream. He has a star-shaped mole on his left shoulder, just like the one you have, Carlos." Vanessa brought a hand to her mouth. "Carlos, you have a mole like that. It's a coincidence," Carlos exclaimed, losing his temper. "Everybody has moles. This old man is crazy. Look at him. He's a slob. How can you believe him over me? I'm Carlos Sanchez, Businessman of the Year." I laughed. It was a dry, bitter laugh without joy. "Are you Carlos Sanchez?" "Yes." "The boy who cried when there was thunder and got into my bed?" "The young man from whom I bought his first car by selling my tools." "And now, the man who lets Pedrito, his son, die of peritonitis 5 floors down because he doesn't want to spend the money from the investment." Don Ernesto put his glass down on the table with a loud thud. "Dying?" the tycoon asked. "There's a child dying in this hospital?" "Yes," I answered, staring at him. "In the emergency room, general ward. Without insurance, because this Businessman of the Year stopped paying for it. Without surgery, because the card he gave me for emergencies has been reported stolen." Carlos lunged at me. It was a desperate move. He grabbed me by the lapels of my nurse's coat and pushed me toward the exit. "Shut up. Shut up, you lying old bastard," he hissed through clenched teeth, his face inches from mine contorted with rage. "You're ruining my life. You ruined it for yourself the day you forgot where you came from," I answered, without struggling. I let him push me away. I wanted everyone to see his violence. "Excuse me, gentlemen," Carlos shouted to the guests as he dragged me toward the terrace balcony. "I have to deal with this psychiatric crisis. One moment, please." He opened the glass door to the terrace and pushed me outside. The cold night air hit my face and he closed the sliding door behind him and pulled the curtain, isolating us from the rest of the party. We were finally alone, father and son, facing each other, but we were no longer a family. We were enemies in a silent war. Outside, the noise of the city below was a constant hum. The car lights were like rivers of lava. Carlos ran his hands through his hair, messing up his style. Perfect. He paced back and forth like a caged lion. "Why?" he yelled at me, no longer pretending. "Why did you have to come and ruin everything?" I was about to sign. Tomorrow I was going to be a majority partner. "Your son is dying, Carlos," I said with a calmness that surprised me. It was the calmness of someone who has nothing left to lose. "Didn't you hear? Peritonitis. His appendix burst. The poison is in his blood." Carlos stopped. He looked at me with disgust. "Kids get sick, Dad. It's normal. Take him to the Social Security. It's free there. Why do you have to make a big deal out of my engagement party? The insurance company is full. There are no operating rooms until tomorrow. If you wait until tomorrow, he'll die. He needs private surgery." Now it's 50,000 pesos. Carlos laughed out loud, incredulously. 50,000. That's why you made this scandal? For 50 measly 1,000 pesos? He reached into his pocket. He reached inside his jacket and pulled out a crocodile skin wallet. It was full of bills, dollars and pesos. He pulled out a wad and threw it at my chest. The bills flew in the wind, falling to the dirty floor of the terrace. There you go, he shouted. There's like 10,000. Get out. Grab your money and get out. I looked at the bills on the ground. I said 50,000, Carlos. And that's just the deposit. I don't have any more cash. He bellowed. Everything else is in joint accounts or invested. Take that and go. I crouched down. Carlos smiled, thinking he had won. Thinking his father, the starving bricklayer, was going to kneel down for a few crumbs. But I didn't pick up the money. I picked up a 500 peso bill that had fallen near my boot. I looked at it for a second, and then tore it into two pieces in front of his face. Carlos' smile faded. What are you doing, you stupid old man? I don't want your hand out, I said, throwing the pieces to the wind. I want you to come down. I want you to show your face. I want you to go into that emergency room, look your son in the eye, and tell him his dad is here. I want you to pay with your platinum card, the one you used to buy champagne. Carlos approached me, threateningly. Listen to me carefully, Roberto. He didn't call me dad anymore. If you don't get out right now, I'm going to call the police for real. I'm going to say you attacked me. I have witnesses. I have money. You're nobody. I'm going to throw you in jail. And that scumbag is going to a government orphanage. Kuna? The scumbag? I asked, feeling the sharp pain in my chest. It's Pedrito. It's your blood. It's the boy who drew you pictures for Father's Day. That boy was a mistake. Carlos exploded. A mistake from one night with a cat. It cost me a fortune to keep him hidden in you. You're the burden that ties me to that world of poverty. There it was. The naked truth. Unvarnished. He didn't hate us for anything we did. He hated us for who we were. Because we reminded him that he wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth, but in a tin-roofed house that I built with my own hands. You sold the house, I said softly. Yes, he admitted, defiantly. And they gave me $3 million for the land. They're going to build a shopping mall. Finally, that dusty land will be good for something. That land was mine. You signed the power of attorney. Legally, I'm the owner. You're just a precarious tenant. And guess what? I'm evicting you. Tomorrow, I want your crap out. I stared at him. I couldn't see my son anymore. I saw a stranger. A dangerous stranger. At that moment, my cell phone vibrated in my pants pocket, under my robe. I took it out. It was a message from Jorge, just a photo. It was Pedrito's heart monitor. The green line was no longer mountains and valleys. It was almost flat, and below it was a text. Code blue. They are reviving. If there is no payment in 10 minutes, they will transfer him to the Green Cross Hospital. But I don't think he will survive the trip. Do something, Mr. Berto. The time for talking was over. The time for mercy had died along with my fatherhood. Okay, Carlos, I said, putting away my cell phone. My voice changed. It became cold, metallic. You're right. I have no place here. I'm leaving. Carlos exhaled in relief and straightened his jacket. You're finally making sense. Go down the service stairs and don't come back. Tomorrow I'll send you a check so you can move into some cheap asylum. I turned and walked toward the glass door, but before entering, I stopped and looked at him one last time. Enjoy your party, son. Enjoy your champagne, because it's the last thing you'll drink in freedom. Carlos laughed. Poor crazy old man. I went back into the suite, ignoring the looks of the guests, and went out into the hallway. As soon as the elevator doors closed, I collapsed, leaned against the metal wall, and slid to the floor. The tears I had held back in front of Carlos came out like vomit. I cried for the son I had lost. I cried for the grandson who was dying. I cried for myself for having been so blind, so stupid, so trusting. Ding. The elevator stopped on the 3rd floor. I had to go down to the emergency room. I had to be with Pedrito. But if I went down without money, I would only watch him die. I looked at my cell phone. 8 minutes left, according to Jorge. 8 minutes to get 50,000 pesos. Or a miracle. Think, Roberto, think. I hit my head with my knuckles. You're the man who fixed broken pipes with chewing gum and wire. Fix this. And then I remembered. One-eyed. Felipe Mendoza, my Friday Domino's partner, Mewe. A lawyer who had lost his license for creative procedures and his eye in a bar fight, but who was known to the civil code better than the Lord's Prayer. He had reviewed the house papers years ago when I made my original will. I dialed his number with trembling fingers. Answer. Old drunk. Answer. Okay. The one-eyed man's voice sounded thick. He was either asleep or drunk. Or both. Felipe, it's Roberto. I need help. It's a matter of life or death. Roberto, it's 10 at night that You're on the hook. My grandson is dying. Carlos betrayed me. He sold the house, forged my signature, cheated me with the power of attorney. I need to stop the sale. I need money. Now there was silence on the other end of the line. I heard the sound of a lighter. The one-eyed man was lighting a cigarette. Let's see, slowly. He sold the house in the working-class neighborhood? Yes, he says he signed today. Impossible, said the one-eyed man, and his voice suddenly cleared. Roberto, do you remember when you mortgaged the house for the trip from Carlos to Spain? Yes, 5 years ago. That mortgage was never formally canceled in the public registry because the bank made an administrative error. I told you, the house has a lien. And what does that matter? Everything matters, idiot. If Carlos sold the house today saying it was free of liens, he committed fraud. And if the notary lent himself to that, it's federal fraud. But there's something else. The land is not only in your name. I was shocked. Oh, how is it in your name and that of Maria, your late wife? Carlos never filed the probate proceeding for his mother. You have 50%, but the other 50% is from Maria's estate. In order to... Carlos needed your signature and the declaration of heirs. He made me sign a broad power of attorney. The power of attorney serves to represent you, Roberto. He can't represent a dead person. If he sold his mother's share without the trial, bro, that's direct imprisonment. And the sales contract is null. Null and void. My brain started to work at 1,000 an hour. Why? Felipe's celebrating with the buyer right now. Ernesto de la Garza. He gave him the money today. De la Garza? The one-eyed man let out a whistle. That old man is powerful, but he's a legalist. He hates trouble. If he finds out you bought a legal problem and not a piece of land, Felipe, I need you to come. Bring the old papers. Bring your nephew, the one who's a policeman. My nephew, Pancho. Yes, he's on duty. But Roberto, that's not going to give you money in 5 minutes for the kid, huh? No, I said looking at the elevator numbers. But he'll give me something better. He's going to give me a loaded gun pointed out at Carlos' head, and he's going to pay, whether he wants to or not. I'm going over there. Hold on for 15 minutes. I don't have 15 minutes, Felipe. I have 5. I hung up. The elevator reached the basement. I ran out, not toward the exit, but toward the hospital security office. I entered the security booth like a hurricane. There were 2 guards eating sandwiches and watching soccer on a small TV. Listen, I yelled at them. I need a favor. Hey, sir, you can't come in here. One of them stood up, reaching for his belt. I'm Roberto Sanchez, the father of the guy in the presidential suite, him. The guards looked at each other. The one from the rich people's party, the younger one, asked, Yeah, listen, that guy is committing a crime upstairs. My lawyer is coming with the police, but I need you to help me connect the suite's audio to the hallway speakers or let me back in. Are you crazy, man? The older guard laughed. They'll kick us out if we do that? At that moment, Jorge, the nurse, appeared. He came running after me, panting. Guys, Jorge shouted. That's right. The guy upstairs is letting his son die down here. I saw him. The guards knew Jorge. He was the one who gave them injections when they got sick and got them free medicine. Are you serious, Jorge? The younger guard asked. On the lives of my children, Jorge swore. This gentleman's grandson is dying in bed 4, and his father is upstairs drinking wine. The atmosphere in the guardhouse changed. In Mexico, you can be corrupt, you can be lazy, but messing with a child, that touches a sacred chord, even for underpaid guards. What do you need, boss? The older guard asked me, setting down his cake. I need to go upstairs, but not alone. I need witnesses, and I need no one to stop me until my lawyer arrives. The guard adjusted his cap. The party upstairs has private security from De Garza. Those guys are annoying. Ex-military. I don't care if they're the indestructibles. I said, I'm going in. The cell phone vibrated again. Message from the one-eyed man. I'm on my way with the patrol car. Pancho has his sirens on. Hold on. Emergency message. Jorge's nurse friend. The boy had respiratory arrest. We stabilized him, but it's a matter of minutes. The surgeon says if there's no payment in 5 minutes, he'll leave. Jorge looked at the guards. Let's go, I said. Time for begging is up. We left the booth. We were a strange army. A construction worker in a nurse's coat, a nurse with a scared face, and 2 chubby security guards with batons. Oh. The alliance of the forgotten. The nobodies, the ones who clean up of the rich. We got into the elevator. This time, I didn't feel afraid. I felt absolute clarity. I was going to destroy my son. I was going to burn his world of lies to the ground, and from the ashes I was going to save my grandson. When the doors opened on the 5th floor, the music was still playing. Brace yourselves, I told my colleagues. There's going to be noise. I walked towards Suite 502 for the 2nd time, but this time I wasn't going to knock on the door. This time, I was going to break it down. Returning to the VIP, corridor was like walking to the gallows, but this time I was the executioner. My 2 friends, the hospital security guards, in their faded uniforms and with batons on their belts, walked alongside me. Jorge, the nurse, came up behind, his face pale but his jaw set. When we reached the door to Suite 502, we came up against a wall. 2 bouncers in black suits and earpieces, Don and Ernesto, private security, blocked our path. They were big guys, the kind who eat steroids for breakfast and nails for dinner. Stop. Right there, one of them said, putting a hand on my chest. This is a private party. Mr. Sanchez gave strict orders that no one was to enter, especially you. Take your hand away, boy, I said without blinking. Get out of here, Grandpa, or we'll drag you out. My hospital guard stepped forward. The senior guard, Don Chuy, adjusted his belt. Listen, comrades, Chuy said. This is our hospital, our jurisdiction. We have a report of a flagrant crime occurring in there. We don't give a damn about your jurisdiction, the guerrilla replied. Diagaza's money is in charge here. The tension rose suddenly. Jorge checked his watch. 3 minutes remain, Mr. Roberto, he shouted, desperately. There was no time for diplomacy. I remembered my years in the Union, the strikes, the confrontations with the strikebreakers. Chuy Pancho, I said, make room for us. And all hell broke loose. Don Chuy, despite his belly, launched himself at the gorilla on the left with a shove worthy of wrestling. The other young guard distracted the second one. It was chaos for 3 seconds. Enough for me. I pushed the double doors open with my shoulder with all the strength I had left in this 70-year-old body. The doors flew open, slamming against the walls with a crash that silenced the music and laughter in an instant. Ah, Carlos! My scream came from deep within me, a roar that made the windows vibrate. Everyone turned. The scene was grotesque. Me, disheveled, sweating, with my nurse's coat crooked. Behind me, my friends were struggling with the private security guards. Carlos was in the center of the room, with a new drink in his hand, regaining his composure. When he saw me, his face fell. It transformed into a mask of pure hatred. You again! Carlos roared, breaking protocol. I told them to get you out. They're useless. No one is getting me out of here until you pay up, I said, walking toward him. My boots resounded like hammer blows on a coffin. You have a debt, son. And you're gonna pay it now. Don Ernesto de la Garza stood up. His face was red with anger, but not at me, but because of the scandal at his party. Enough, the tycoon shouted. This is a circus. Carlos, explain this or I'll cancel everything right now. Carlos ran toward his father-in-law, trembling. Don Ernesto, please. This is blackmail. This man is dangerous. He is armed. He is probably armed. I raised my empty hands, my calloused hands. My only weapons are these, Mr. de la Herron, I said, looking him in the eyes. The hands that built the house that this coward sold you today. Carlos laughed hysterically. Don't believe him. That house was mine. I have the papers. He signed it. He's a senile old man who doesn't know what he said. Oh, yes. A raspy voice, full of cheap tobacco smoke, echoed from the entrance. We all turned. There, in the doorway, was Felipe, the one-eyed Mendoza. He looked terrible. He was wearing an old-fashioned brown suit, shiny from use, a mustard-stained tie, and his eye patch over his left eye was crooked. He looked like a vagabond, but behind him came two uniformed policemen. Real policemen, with long weapons. One of them was his nephew, Pancho. Good evening to the fine audience, said the one-eyed man, walking toward the center of the room with a slight limp. He pulled a bundle of yellowed papers from under his armpit. I'm sorry to interrupt the toast, but we have a summons. Who the hell are you? Asked Vanessa, the bride, hiding behind her mother. Attorney Felipe Mendoza, at your service, miss. Attorney for Mr. Roberto Sanchez, and executor of the estate of the late Maria Gonzalez. The one-eyed man smiled, showing his yellow teeth. And I've come to stop $1 million fraud. Carlos paled. He looked as if he was going to throw up. Felipe, whispered Carlos, my father's drunken friend. Security, get this clown out. If your guerrillas move, my officers will shoot, said the one-eyed man calmly, pointing to the policemen who already had their hands in their holsters. This is a federal matter, my boy. One-eyed man reached the table where Mr. Ernesto was sitting and threw the papers on the linen tablecloth. Mr. de la Garza, I understand that you bought the property in the Colonia Obrera today for 3 million pesos. Is that correct? Don Ernesto nodded slowly, looking at Carlos suspiciously. That's right. The transfer was made at 9 in the morning. Well, I regret to inform you that you bought air, said the one-eyed man, lighting a cigarette without asking permission. That contract is null. Carlos here sold you 100% of a property of which you can only dispose of 50%. The other half belongs to your mother's estate, which was never processed wast. And without the signature of the surviving spouse, he pointed to me, as the heir, that sale is a contrived fraud. A deathly silence fell over the room. Don Ernesto grabbed the papers and read them quickly. His eyes widened and he turned to Carlos. Carlos. His voice was a dangerous whisper. You told me the papers were in order. You told me you were the sole owner. Carlos stepped back, sweating profusely. It's a technicality, Ernesto. I can fix it. My dad signed a power of attorney. Power is for administration, not for stealing inheritances, the one-eyed man shouted. Besides, the notary you used is already singing at the police station. He said you gave him 50,000 pesos to skip the mortgage registration. Oh, because that's another one. The house is mortgaged, Mr. Ernesto. The bank has preference over you. Mr. Ernesto turned purple. The veins in his neck bulged. You've scammed me, he roared. You've sold me a property with a lien and legal problems, with my own money. No, that wasn't my intention, Carlos snorted. I needed cash for the wedding. I was going to fix it later. You're an idiot. Mr. Ernesto slapped him so hard that it rang out like a gunshot. Carlos fell to the floor, knocking over a table with glasses. I watched the scene without pleasure. Time was running out, as was money. I said, I don't give a damn about the house, or the damn wedding. Where's the money? Carlos got up from the floor, his lips split, blood staining his white shirt. He didn't look like a prince anymore. He looked like a wet rat. He glared at me with a hatred I'd never seen in a human being. It's all your fault, he shouted, pointing a trembling finger at me. You were always a nuisance. I wish you were really dead, Carlos. Ay. Vanessa's voice shook. Is it true about the baby? Do you have a son? Carlos turned to her in desperation. No, well, yes, but it was a mistake. He's a bastard I had with a... He doesn't mean anything to me. At that moment, Jorge, the nurse, stepped forward. It means nothing? Jorge asked, pulling out his cell phone. So why did you say this an hour ago? Jorge picked up the phone and pressed play. He connected the audio to the Bluetooth speaker system on the table. A quick trick he'd pulled while everyone was arguing. Carlos' voice echoed throughout the suite. Clear, sharp, and cruel. If the kid dies, it's because you're useless. Stop messing around or I'll block you. I'm closing $1 million deal. If he dies, you bury him. And then another recording, the one from a few minutes ago on the terrace. That kid was a mistake. It cost me a fortune to keep him hidden. And you're the burden that ties me to that world of poverty. I want your crap out tomorrow. The room froze. It was as if the devil had passed by and breathed on everyone. Vanessa covered her mouth in horror. Tears began to run down her cheeks. Vanessa's mother hugged her dog, looking at Carlos as if he were a monster. I walked toward him. Carlos was cornered against the window. That mistake, I said softly. His name is Pedrito. And while you were toasting with champagne, he was asking about his dad. Carlos burst into tears, but they weren't tears of regret, they were the tears of a tantrum-throwing child who has been discovered. They don't understand, he screamed. Poverty is an illness. I just wanted to get better. I wanted to be somebody. You already were somebody, I told him. You were my son. But today you have truly been orphaned. I turned to Don Ernesto. Mr. De La Garza, my lawyer says the sale is void. That means you have to get your money back. But my grandson doesn't have time for lawsuits. He needs surgery. Now Don Ernesto looked at me. I saw in his eyes the respect he had lost for Carlos. How much is it? He asked. 50,000 pesos for the deposit. Don Ernesto took out his gold checkbook, wrote quickly with fury, tore out the check, and gave it to me. Here's 100,000 so you can get the best room. And this is not a loan, Don Roberto. It is an apology for having let this animal into my family. I took the check. My hands were shaking, but this time with relief. Thank you, I said. Pancho, the one-eyed man, ordered his policeman nephew. Wife to the businessman of the year. We're facing charges of fraud, forgery, and abandonment of an incompetent person. The cops pounced on Carlos. No, you can do this to me. He screamed as they put the cold, hard metal handcuffs on him. I'm Carlos Sanchez. Vanessa, tell him something. Vanessa took off her engagement ring, a huge diamond, and threw it in his face. Screw you, Carlos. I didn't stay to watch them take Carlos away. I didn't care. To me, he was already dead. I ran out of the suite with a check in my hand, followed by Jorge. Run, Jorge! Run, I yelled as we waited for the elevator. It's coming. The elevator took forever. When the doors opened, we almost jumped in. We descended the 5 flights of stairs in silence, praying. I clutched the paper to my chest as if it were a holy relic. Oh, God, don't take him. I have the money. I've already punished the bad guy. Please give me the boy. The doors opened to the basement. The emergency room hallway was still the same. Chaotic. Noisy. I ran to the cashier. The lady with the gum saw me coming. She saw my face. She saw the blood-aid on my gown from when Carlos had pushed me, and she got scared. There it is, I shouted, stamping Ernesto de la Garza's check against the glass. 100,000 pesos. Confirmed by the owner of the Paraiso Hotel. Operate on the boy. The girl looked at the check, saw the signature, saw the amount. Her eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Oh my goodness! She grabbed the phone. Dr. Martinez, we have the payment. Prepare operating room 1. I fell to my knees in front of the window. I couldn't breathe. Jorge helped me up. Come on, Don Roberto. Let's go see him before they put him in. We ran to bed 4. The bed was empty. I felt like the world stopped. The noise of the hospital disappeared. All I could hear was a high-pitched buzzing in my ears. I didn't whisper. No, no, no. Where's the baby? Jorge shouted to a nurse who was passing by. The baby's Sanchez, she said hurriedly. They just took him away. The doctor said he couldn't wait any longer. I pay or I don't pay. He risked everything. They're going into the operating room right now. I leaned against the wall and slid to the floor. I cried. I cried like I hadn't cried since my Maria died. I didn't know if I was crying from pain or from hope. But the doctor, that man whose face I hadn't seen properly, had risked it for us. He had put his career on the line for my grandson. Blessed be God, I stammered between sobs. Blessed be God and good people. Jorge sat down next to me and put an arm around my shoulders. We did it, Don Roberto. Now all that's left is to... 4 hours passed, the longest 4 hours of my life. I sat in the waiting room still in my borrowed gown, staring at Biben's operating room door. The one-eyed man arrived a moment later. He brought me a coffee and a sandwich. Carlos has already been processed, he said quietly, sitting down next to me. The judge denied him bail. The fraud is huge, and there's a risk of escape. He's going to stay in the northern prison for a long time. I nodded, feeling nothing, neither joy nor sadness, just a huge void where my father's love used to be. And the house. The sale was canceled. Don Ernesto dropped the charges against you for invading the party and is going to testify that Carlos acted in bad faith. The house is yours, Roberto. Well, yours and Maria's estate. We're going to fix the paperwork so it's in Pedrito's name with a lifetime usufruct for you. No one's going to get you out of there. Thank you, Felipe. I don't know how to repay you. You pay me with a bottle of tequila, okay, when we get through this, and stop crying, because you're making me emotional. At 3 in the morning, the operating room door opened. The surgeon came out. He looked exhausted, holding his green cap in his hand. I jumped up, ignoring the pain in my joints. Doctor. The doctor looked at me and smiled tiredly. That kid is a real beast. His appendix had died. There was a lot of infection. We had to wash out his entire abdomen. But his heart is strong. He's alive. He's alive, Mr. Berto. And he's going to be fine. We're taking him to recovery. You can see him in 2 hours. I hugged the doctor. I hugged him tightly, staining his scrubs with my tears and the cement dust that was still on his clothes. Thank you. Thank you. That was all I could say. The doctor patted me on the back. Don't thank me. Thank your friend Jorge. He threatened to tell my wife about my friend from accounting if I didn't operate. I looked at Jorge, who was asleep in a chair in the back. I smiled. That nurse was an angel disguised as a blackmailing devil. I went out into the hospital parking lot to get some air. Dawn was breaking over the city. The sky turned from black to gray, and then to a soft orange. I took my phone and turned it on. I had 10 missed calls from an unknown number. It was probably Carlos from the police station using his authorized call. I looked at the phone, thought about answering it, thought about listening to his excuses, his pleas. Dad, get me out. I was wrong. But then I thought of Pedrito, of his cold little hand, of the party, and of the champagne. I took the chip out of the phone, broke it with my fingers, then threw the entire phone in a trash can. Goodbye, Carlos, I said to the morning wind. May God forgive you because I no longer have the strength to do it. I went back into the hospital. My grandson was waiting for me, and I had to be strong for him. Now it was just the two of us against the world. But this time, I knew we could win. Young 16, his tin jack. The morning sun was streaming through the window of room 304. It wasn't the presidential suite, but to me it was the most beautiful palace in the world because there was my grandson, breathing. Pedrito slowly opened his eyes. He was surrounded by tubes and monitors, but there was already color in his cheeks. I reached over and stroked his hair. My hands, now clean of cementy but still rough, were shaking a little. Grandpa? His voice was a thread. Here I am, my son. Here I am. I haven't left. Pedrito looked around with his big, dark eyes. He was looking for someone. I knew who he was looking for. And my heart sank. And my dad? He asked. I dreamed he came. I dreamed he brought me a toy. I swallowed hard. It was the hardest moment. What do you say to a 5-year-old whose father chose a party over his life? Do I lie to protect him or tell him the truth to prepare him? I remembered Carlos's lies. His whole life a lie. No, I wasn't going to build our new life on false foundations. Your dad couldn't come, Pedrito, I said, looking him in the eyes. Your dad got lost. Did he get lost in the woods? He asked innocently. Yes, my love. He got lost in a very dark forest where people forget who they are, and I think it's going to take him a long time to find his way back. Pedrito seemed to think about it for a moment. Then he reached out his hand and grabbed my finger. It doesn't matter, Grandpa. You know the way home, don't you? Tears welled up in my eyes. Yes, my love. I do know the way, and I'll never let you go. Jorge came into the room with a lemon jelly. He winked at us. Room service for the bravest patient, he said, and for the most dangerous. Grandpa in the hospital. Nele. We laughed. For the first time in 24 hours, I really laughed. Jong titin. Yo chai kwaku. 3 days later, we were discharged. Returning to the house in the workers' neighborhood was strange. The house was still the same. The patio with the avocado tree, the peeling walls, the smell of humidity and beans. But it felt different. Before, I saw it as a pigsty, because that's what Carlos called it. Now, I saw it for what it was, a castle. Our castle. The first thing I did was go to Carlos' room. It was exactly as he had left it when he moved into his luxury apartment years ago. His high school soccer trophies, his diplomas, the photos of him smiling in designer clothes. I grabbed a large cardboard box and started to put everything in it. The trophies, the diplomas, the photos, everything. Pedrito looked at me from the doorway, hugging a teddy bear that Jorge had given him. What are you doing, Grandpa? Cleaning. Son, taking out the trash. I took the box to the backyard. I sprayed some gasoline that I used for the lawnmower. I lit a match and dropped it. The flames rose quickly, devouring the plastic and paper. I watched as Carlos' smiling face in a graduation photo blackened and burned away. I didn't feel sadness. I felt relief. It was like cauterizing an infected wound. In order for new flesh to grow, you have to burn away the rotten. The one-eyed man arrived that afternoon with good news. That's it, Roberto. The judge annulled the sale. The house is back in your name. And I've already filed a lawsuit to take away Carlos' custody with his criminal record and abandonment. It's a one case. Pedrito is legally yours. And Carlos? I asked, looking at the ashes in the yard. They transferred him to the Oriente prison, general population. They say he's not having a good time. The other inmates don't like rich kids who mistreat their own flesh and blood. I nodded. God is just, Felipe. God is just. Juan 18, the Tuyanguk. A month later, a letter arrived. The envelope bore the seal of the prison system. It had no return address, but I knew that sharp, elegant handwriting. I sat at the kitchen table with my reading glasses. Pedrito was at school. I opened the envelope. Dad, get me out of here. I can't take it anymore. They beat me up yesterday because I couldn't afford the protection fee. You have to sell the house. Sell it and pay my bail. It's your duty. I'm your son. If you leave me here, they'll kill me. Please, Dad. I forgive you for the hospital, but get me out, Carlos. I read the letter twice. I forgive you. He forgave me. That boy's cynicism knew no bounds even behind bars. Not a word asking about Pedrito. Not a word asking about him. I got up, went to the stove and turned on the burner. I held the paper close to the fire. I watched as the words, I am your son turned to gray smoke. I didn't say it out loud to the empty kitchen. You are not my son. My son died the day he was ashamed of my hands. You are just a stranger with my last name. I threw the ashes into the sink and turned on the water. They went down the drain, swirling in a dark vortex. I slept like a baby that day. Jong 19 with Lee Tick. 6 months passed. Life went on, as it always does. I went back to taking on masonry work, but only light odd jobs. Jorge would come over for dinner on Sundays. He had become the Uncle Peto never had. One day, I saw a small news story in the police section of the newspaper. Businessman sentenced. 15 years in prison. Carlos Sanchez, the hotel heiress's ex-fiancé, was found guilty of fraud, forgery of documents, and attempted murder by neglect of care to the detriment of her minor son. The judge gave the maximum sentence due to the aggravating factor of kinship. The note said that Garza's family had pressed for the punishment to be exemplary. Don Ernesto did not forgive them for trying to fool him. Carlos had lost everything. His money, his fame, his girlfriend, his freedom, and, most ironically, he had lost it all by trying to save 50,000 pesos. Out of greed. They say that money does not change people. It only unmasks them. Carlos had always worn that mask, and I was the last to see it fall. I folded the newspaper and used it to wrap some rusty nails. 15 years, I muttered. When you get out, Pedrito will already be a man, and you will be an old man, older than I am now, and you will be alone. That was his real sentence, not prison. Loneliness. Tuanta, kairiba kan kai ketu. Ka. It's Sunday afternoon. We're in the park. Pedrito runs after a soccer ball, laughing out loud. He doesn't remember the hospital much anymore. Children are made of rubber. They heal quickly. Scars on the skin heal. Those on the soul take longer, but with love, they soften. I'm sitting on a bench carving a piece of wood with my knife. My old hands are still useful for creating things. I'm making a little boat for him. I look at my hands. Those calloused, ugly hands, full of scars. Carlos hated them. He said they were hands of a poor, failed man. But these hands saved my grandson. These hands broke down the doors of a fancy party. These hands signed the complaint. These hands burned the past. They are the hands of a gardener, after all. And a good gardener knows that sometimes the most beautiful tree has a rotten branch. A branch that sucks the sap from the others, that poisons the trunk. And even though it hurts, even though you cry while you do it, you have to cut that branch. You have to amputate it so that the rest of the tree can live. Pedrito scores a goal and runs towards me with open arms. Grandpa, did you see that? I catch him in midair and hug him. It smells of child's sweat and life. I saw him. I look at the sky. There are no clouds. Carlos is in a cell with 2 skulls. I am here, embracing my future. It hurts to have lost a son. Yes, every day. It is a phantom pain, like when someone cuts off your leg, and you feel like your foot still stings. But then I look at Pedrito, and I know that I did the right thing. Blessed be God who gave me the strength to lift the axe, and blessed be God who gave me the aim to not miss the blow. If this story has captivated you, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left of the screen. Thanks for watching.